and that she was calling because she was very concerned. And when she got to the point, she said that her daughter goes to school with our son, and her friends were very concerned that our son was going to overdose. And my wife is, I'm sitting there watching her on the phone, and she's like, "You called the wrong house. You've got the wrong family. We don't have any issues with our son. He's doing fine in school. He doesn't smoke cigarettes. We don't have any issues with him."
You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. I'm back with Kim Humphrey, and Kim is the president of PAL. PAL is Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. It's a peer support group for parents. You have a son or daughter battling drug or alcohol addiction. I've been personally facilitating a PAL group for, I guess, about 7 years. So anyway, Kim is here today, and Kim has a background in law enforcement, about 32 years, and a very extensive background there. And I'll let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background and what brought him to PAL. And then I'll let him just we'll go back and forth a little bit and talk about PAL and how PAL can benefit you if you're the parent of a child battling drug or alcohol addiction. All right, Kim.
Hey,
good to have you here today. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. And thanks for all that you're doing. And and first and foremost, thanks for your service to PAL over the past 7 years. I know that there's many families out there that have benefited from that, and it's our volunteer facilitators that really make the difference. And so again, thank you for what you're doing. And as I look back over the years, when my wife and I got married and eventually had a couple of sons, I have to tell you that it was pretty idealistic, and we really had what I would call a good life. We didn't necessarily have a lot, but we had each other, and we were doing well. And as they grew, it just seemed like, typical things that we dealt with, nothing of any consequence. And so when our older son was 15 and we received a phone call one evening, it was not only a shock, but it was almost a point of complete disbelief, because the woman on the other line introduced herself to my wife, said she had met her at school functions, and that she was calling because she was very concerned. And when she got to the point, she said that her daughter goes to school with our son, and her friends were very concerned that our son was going to overdose. And my wife is, I'm sitting there watching her on the phone, and she's like, "You called the wrong house. You've got the wrong family. We don't have any issues with our son. He's doing fine in school. He doesn't smoke cigarettes. We don't have any issues with him." And so she insists that they're very concerned. And by the time she hangs up, we're bringing our son out into the living room, and we're asking him about what he thinks about this phone call. And of course, he immediately is like, "Well, of course I don't do that. And, why are you even asking me?" And we're like, "Well, maybe we need to do a drug test." And then "Why, you don't trust me?" And I'm like, I should have just immediately, said, "Well, there you go. There's the answer to that." But we did. We went and got the drug test right that minute, went over to the drugstore, came back, finally got him to provide that, and then came back positive for opioids. So my family went from, we didn't have any issues, we didn't have any concerns, I didn't see anything. And as you mentioned, my background is in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement at the time. I didn't see it. And I think that is indicative of the fact that we're parents. And as parents, here's what happens. When it's our kids, it's like this. And we were shocked. I mean, to say the least. And then immediately jumped into, how are we going to fix this? And I'd like to tell you that, we, took him over here, this program or that program, or we did everything. Nothing worked. It got worse. As a matter of fact, it just spiraled out of control. And over the course of the next several years, And if I were to jump ahead, I'd actually tell you it's going to be 9 or 10 years before we actually see anything that really is of any consequence when it came to him seeking any help
Wow.
whatsoever that was
Mm.
of significance. I mean, we ended up with a son that, started committing crimes and then eventually became homeless, and he was living in the bushes in the park. And in law enforcement, I'm getting calls from people I work with telling me that they just found him in a park under a bush, and things like that. And I'm like, it was devastating. And as we're dealing with this, we have a younger son who's 4 years younger, and he's just, he's watching all this stuff, and he knows, we're thinking, he's no way is he going to follow those footsteps. And he gets a little older, he goes off to college. He's in a couple of years mechanical engineering, and one day he drops out of school, and the next thing you know, we're talking to him, and he's doing the same thing. And so, back to the original point, how and why did we get involved? Well, I'll tell you, my wife and I looked at each other and felt like we were probably the worst parents on the planet. I mean, how could this happen? What did we do? And yet, nothing we could point to, nothing we could find would say, oh, well, here was this event, or here was this or that. It was just, frankly, they made a choice, and it was one of those times where they tried something, and the way it affected them versus the way those drugs affect like me, completely different. And
Mhm.
they wanted more, and they just kept looking for more. And as this spiraled out of control, and the harder we tried to help them, and the more we tried, and the worse it got, eventually we were just so desperate that, we started becoming reclusive. I mean, like, not wanting to go out. Our friends, really didn't want to hear our story. They were tired of it, and they didn't even understand it. And we were thinking, wow, these were people we know and cared about us, and yet they're just like, yeah, I don't understand that. Almost even looking at us and asking us what we did wrong. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know everything. I don't know. You know. And as this progressed, and it continued, one day my wife was just searching on the internet, like, help for parents, and she found this group that was just here in Phoenix. It was at a treatment center and it was actually designed for parents, and it was called PAL, and parents of addicted loved ones. And she said, let's go. And I honestly, I don't know that I really wanted to, but we went. And and when we went there, I will say that it was the first time that I realized, one, we weren't alone. There were other people that were going through the same thing. And some of these people seemed to be okay, and I was not okay, but they seemed to be okay. And I was trying to understand, how can you be like that? It seems like you would be miserable because I'm miserable. And I remember sitting there for several weeks, and I didn't say anything. It's like 6 weeks. I said nothing. I just sat there and said nothing. And finally, the facilitator, after 6 weeks, got around the room when they offer this opportunity to check in and say how it's going, and came to me and said, "Do you want to say something?" And I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, you kind of look like you want to say something." No. And he's like, "I've been sitting here for a while. Seems like a few weeks
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
Tell me, is there something on your mind?" Okay. Yeah. I came here and I wanted to hear how to fix my sons. And I've been waiting 6 weeks, and you haven't told me how to do that. When are you
Mhm.
going to tell me how to do that? And he's like, "Oh, I see. You're a fix it person." Well, isn't everybody? He goes, "Well, are you good at fixing things?" I go, "Well, sure. I do it all the time." "Oh, I see." He goes, "Okay, well, here's the thing. Can't fix your sons. We could work on you if you'd like to do that."
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, me? I'm not the one with the issue. I'm not the one with why do we need to work on me? And I'm like, okay, well, needless to say, that was that eye-opening experience that day where I did realize there were things I could do. And he made it very clear, you know what? There are things you can do. You can change your relationship to a more adult relationship. You can work on being a role model that's going to potentially give your son hope in all of this. And he said, and there's things you can do, but mostly it's about you. Take care of yourself and realize that if you are healthier, you're going to have a healthier response when you're dealing with your son. And so, needless to say, it was a couple of months later, he did what happened to you probably, and that is
Mhm.
somebody asked you to be a facilitator, or you just
Mhm.
volunteered. And I'm like, I'm not qualified to do that. And he's like, no, you're in it, therefore you're qualified.
All right.
And so that was the beginning of my wife and I starting a PAL meeting on our side of town. And that's kind of how PAL started. Is at this one facility, and then it
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
grew, and this facilitator would just sort of branch them off into different parts of town here. And it eventually had gotten to, oh, I think there was about a dozen meetings or so by about 2014. And that's when I retired. So I retired from the police department here in 2014, literally the same week. I get a call from the founder of PAL, Mike Speakman, and
Mhm.
he's like, Kim, he goes, I just turned 70 years old. He goes, I'm trying to write a book about this issue, and I'm getting all these calls about PAL, and I honestly don't have the capacity. I don't know exactly how I can do all this, and I don't even know what to do with it because it's a very just it's loose. It's kind of a loose knit thing, and all of that. But he goes, there's just a lot of people that are interested in it. Would you help? And I'm thinking, well, I just retired, and that's what I said. I so I said I don't want to do anything else. And he goes, well, then you have plenty of time. You need to. And in all seriousness, PAL had become such an important thing to us, and for me to say no would be to walk away from the fact that all these people had helped us and poured into our lives and walked alongside of us. And it was like, I can't say no to that. And my wife couldn't say no to that. And we got together with him and with other parents that were interested. And within about 4 months, early 2015, he handed over all of it to this group of parents, and we formed it as a nonprofit in early 2015 with those roughly dozen meetings or so here. And we had already had somebody in another state calling us by that point. But you just flash forward to today, since then, 9 years ago, and PAL now has in-person meetings in I think 38 states. We have online meetings that reach every state in the United States, and we now have people from 9 foreign countries that have signed up for online meetings.
Mm.
We have meetings in Spanish. We have one that's catered towards Europe based on the time frame. So because we had enough
Mhm.
there. And so, um, yeah, it's grown tremendously. And over those years, we went from 100% volunteer to what it grew to the point where we had to start, raising funds and turning it into paid positions to oversee it and to help it to grow. And that's where it's at today. And I will tell you, you're a perfect example of what's happened in another state in another area where you were willing to take this on and provide this resource to your community. And what's really commendable is to look at the fact that of what you went through, and that you really wanted to do something with what happened, and to make a difference in other people's lives. And so I can't thank our volunteers and our facilitators enough, because that's really what the PAL organization is we're a support for facilitators and volunteers. And that's what we're trying to do, is just be that support, create this infrastructure so it can grow, provide the meetings for free so that there's no barriers for people to come. But that was kind of a long answer to your question, but I kind of got
No,
got us off to a start there of
yeah, that was really
how I
good.
got involved and how where PAL's at now.
Yeah. You were describing me to a T when you were talking about, trying to wanting to be able to fix the situation, fix my son. That was sort of my thought process. It wasn't, it was more of a subconscious thought, that I think somewhere deep inside, I knew that wasn't the way this worked, but having no experience with addiction in the past, and having been thrust into this world, it caught me off guard, and we ended up having an intervention for him, and through that intervention, we were able to get him into treatment in South Florida, and my whole thought somewhere in the back of my mind was that we're going to send him to treatment. They're going to fix him and they're going to send him back. And somebody said something to me. It may have been the interventionist at that point about working on myself or going to some Al-Anon meetings. I didn't know anything about PAL at that point. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. But it just wasn't a priority because I didn't think I needed any work. I kind of saw it as it was his problem. He was the one that needed the help. So yeah, same sort of mindset there. And I made the shift at some point. I began to realize that this affects the whole family. Addiction affects the whole family, and that I didn't cause this problem, but that I was probably contributing to the problem instead of contributing to the solution. And really, when I came to PAL, it was the interventionist that directed me. And he said, "Have you ever heard of PAL?" And I said, "No," because I reached out to him looking for other ways I could get involved, and really, all of that was really healing for me. Being able to do something to help where I felt like I was helping others. But I showed up at an in-person meeting, and it pretty soon the lady that had launched that meeting asked me to become a co-facilitator, and then she eventually went back to work full time and couldn't. She felt like she couldn't keep up the responsibilities. But it was an in-person meeting until COVID happened, and that's when we went online. And then we have people come into the meeting, like you were saying. We have one that comes in from Guatemala. I think she's the only one out of the country, but other people out of the state that come into that meeting now. So we've stayed online. I do like in person, and we like to have one or two gatherings a year at least that are in person, where we'll all go out to a restaurant and meet the people that are local. But anyway, but PAL has really is changed my way of thinking about things. And sometimes, you learn the most when you are. I know at PAL, I'm not a coach, I'm not a teacher, I'm a facilitator. I'm in a facilitating role, but even as a facilitator, you have to understand the subject matter, and so you do learn a lot in that role. I think you learn more being in that role than you do with just participating as an attendee.
Right. Well, and one of the things that sets PAL apart from other organizations and groups and things like that is that PAL meetings are designed to be a peer-to-peer support group.
Hmm.
And certainly that's what they do, but they also have an educational component. So we have a
That's right.
curriculum that's about addiction and recovery. And so every meeting has a curriculum that is facilitated. And then following that, there's an opportunity for people to share about what's going on. And then another thing that's unique is that in that opportunity to share, you have the opportunity to request suggestions if you want, or to have a discussion about what's
Hmm.
going on.
Hmm.
So you can either just say, hey, I don't want to, I want to pass. So you could also say, here's what's going on. And you just give a little update, or you can say, you know what, I got this call. My son or daughter asked me this, and I don't know what to do. Could you guys give me some feedback? And
Hmm.
so there's an ability to have this affinity with those that are there, and not only have this commonality, but be able to share experiences and then learn together. And like you
Right.
said, I'm educated on this issue so that you can make better decisions, hopefully. And really what we try to focus in on is healthy decisions. We try to
Yeah.
avoid rights and wrongs, and we
Yeah.
try to focus on this is healthy and this is unhealthy. And obviously the unhealthy things are the things that really can send you in that direction of depression and anxiety and all of the other things that go along with trying to control, well, basically trying to control something you have no control over.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, one of those lessons that's hard to learn.
Yeah, I think, the people that come into the PAL meetings really like the format from my experience. A lot of them have been to other peer support groups, and um, they like the educational component. It adds structure, and they like the opportunity to be able to share what's going on with them and to get the feedback, like you said. So it's a really good format, in my opinion. Just uh, I get a lot of good feedback from parents who attend the PAL meetings along those lines.
Yeah, yeah. And I just, over the years, all the different people that have come through our meeting, which is probably our meeting has been going on for actually we just passed 12 years, so long time been there, and probably had in the thousands of different people that have come through the meeting, and I have to say that the thing that stands out to me after all this time is that people come in and they honestly believe that their situation is different.
Right.
That
Oh
that
yeah.
there's something about them that's different than everybody else that's in the room, and they walk in with that idea. And it's so normal that you can almost read as they're sitting
Right.
like, oh, they don't
Uh,
get my scenario, they don't understand this. And and it's kind of interesting over a very short period of time how they have this almost epiphany, and when they realize that no, it's not unique. No, there's almost I'm going to use the word formula, but I'm going to maybe say curriculum. There's a
mhm.
curriculum to this issue. People do respond in very similar ways to these things, and it becomes pretty obvious that you can understand, you can know, this, because if you think about it for a second, if everybody's situation is unique, in other words, nobody has the same issue, nobody has the same responses or anything else, well, then think about how virtually impossible it would be to resolve it, because we need a billion solutions, because there's a billion different ways to deal with it. But when you
Mhm.
start
Mhm.
looking at it and realizing there are commonalities, and
Yeah.
that pretty much there is a pretty straightforward path on how and what tends to happen, then all of a sudden you realize, okay, no, I'm not only not alone, but I can have a good understanding and be prepared as I sit here and listen to people and understand this is why they say things like, well, relapse tends to be pretty common. As a matter of fact, most of the time it happens. Okay, well then if I know that, then like when my son went into something the very first time, and I'm going up, we used to like to say, you like to go to the 200th floor of the hotel, because wow, they're in treatment. 30 days later, they're going to be fixed, and then they come
Mhm.
out, and then shortly thereafter they relapse, and you're like devastated. Well, what if the folks in the room kind of prepared you for that and helped you to
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
And we had a person in our meeting. It was kind of humorous when we first started our meeting, and she was there for the first 6, 8, 10 weeks or so, and she came in one day and she said, you know, I came in here and I really thought that my situation was different than everybody else's, and I thought it was all completely unique. And she says, and now I'm starting to realize that I'm suffering from chronic uniqueness. I'm like, I held on to that phrase from that day forward, because I was like, you're right, because I thought so too. I thought my situation
Mhm.
was totally different. And then after I sat there for a few weeks, I realized, no, it's not. And that's a good thing, because that means that the people there really can provide you with information, and surround you and support you, because they get it. They understand.
Yeah.
They understand
Yeah.
what you're going through. They understand what you're dealing with. And so it's a tough world to be in. Um,
Mhm.
but it's also one where I am so thankful that others would go to that meeting and they would share their experiences, and essentially give us hope. And we know that not everybody gets better. And
Right.
that's the truth. And that is this really tough part about this. And losing loved ones, sadly, is something that happens regularly. And all the more reason that we got to keep working and we got to keep doing what we can to try and just get a handle on this thing and change the stigma around, this issue in families, change the dialogue around it, and help people focus on, let's work together to find solutions to this, and not, the opposite, which is, oh gee, that's their problem and it's not going to happen to me. So
Right. Um, we didn't talk about this before we started recording, but I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'm just curious how are your boys doing now? Would you mind answering that, or how are they?
yeah, so after 10 years of this going essentially downhill, and to the point where they
Mm,
were homeless and had gotten into a lot of trouble.
mm,
They had been through multiple treatment programs. Our older son actually had overdosed multiple times, and
mm,
he actually didn't know about it
mhm,
because he wasn't around. And then we started to find out about it because for a while there he was still on our insurance, and so we
mm,
would see these things pop up on our insurance where he'd be hospitalized, and then we'd find out what he was hospitalized for. And so at that point, we had been going to PAL for quite some time, and I have to say that we were at a point where it was tough. I mean, first we weren't seeing him a lot, or if at all, and then when we did, he just wasn't interested in
mhm,
getting any
mhm.
help, and no matter what we did, he just was, he wasn't going to do it. And it had gotten to the point where it was just it was so bad that my wife and I had started spending all the holidays, all of our anything that we would normally have our family around. We would just, well, escape, go somewhere,
Mm.
try and do something, because we didn't want to. We didn't want to have, for example, Christmas at our house and the two of us, with both of
Yeah,
our sons out there, and
yeah.
we don't know where they are, and all of that. And we had planned a trip to go out of town that year, this one year, and I'll never forget, the phone rings and it's the hospital, and here's our older son in the hospital again, and I'm like, he's hospitalized all the time.
Mm,
And I start talking to him, and he's a mess. He's absolutely a mess. And it's the day we're leaving on, or day before we're leaving on this trip, and we talked to him, and he finally, he's begging us to come see him, and he's promising the world, and he's going to get better and all this. And we're like, okay, so we canceled our trip, and we went down and we sat with him for 2 weeks in that hospital, almost
mm, mm,
the whole time. Oh, the minute I get out of here, I'm going to go get the help I need and all that. And and if you can't tell the slight sarcasm in my voice, it's because I've done this so many times. I honestly don't
right.
believe we're doing it again. I
Yeah,
honestly don't. And then
yeah.
sure enough, he gets out of the hospital, and within days, he has not only relapsed, but he has gone to Los Angeles from Phoenix, and he's living on the streets of Los Angeles, and we have no idea where he is.
Mm,
And it's months later that he's going to get picked up by a rescue mission somewhere, and that's the first time we're going to hear about him. And
mm,
eventually he's going to come back to Phoenix and all of that. And in the meantime, our younger son's doing similar things, and we don't know where he is. And flash forward literally a year later, so the following Christmas, we rebook the exact same trip, and we're packing up our stuff, we're getting ready to leave the next day. I know it seems like it's not possible. It is. The phone rings, and I will be darned if it is not at the hospital. And this time it's not him, it's a nurse, and this nurse is like, yeah, we have your son in the hospital, and he's not doing very well, and he's asking for you, and he's hoping that you come down and see him. And I just said, listen, can you tell me how he's doing? And she says, well, not very well. I said, well, do you think he's going to survive? And she says, well, I don't know. you know. I said, well, do you think he's going to live? And she says, I can't answer that question. I said, well, is there somebody there that can? She says, well, the doctor just walked in the room. I said, can I talk to the doctor? And she hands the doctor the phone. I ask him the same question. He acts like, why are you asking me this question? And I'm like, please just tell me, do you think my son's going to survive? He says, we're going to do everything we can. So you think he'll survive? Yes, I think he'll survive. Thank you. Would you please tell our son that we love him very much? We're going to be praying for him, but we're not coming to the hospital. We're going on vacation. Now, I can only imagine a lot of people would hear that and they would say, I cannot believe you just did that. However, I will tell you that that was 10 years in the making to say
Right. Yeah.
And then I will also tell you that if you think I just got in the car with my wife and we started driving to our destination and we were all happy and all that, no, we cried. We cried for hours.
Yeah.
And we sat there and we thought about it and we second guessed ourselves. But because we had the support of PAL and they had been encouraging us to do something for ourselves and to just go, we went. And interestingly enough, if you ask my son today, here's his story. He says the nurse comes back over, is standing there when this doctor says this. And he says, and it hits me after they walk out of the room and I'm laying there, what I've done. And that I don't want to live this way anymore. And I want my relationships back and I want my family back. And I want all of this. And I can't do it. And in his experience, he said, I looked up and I said, God, you got to get me out of this. I can't do it. That was his experience. And he said that from that point on, he said, I just decided I was going to let go of trying to control this myself. I was going to trust other people. I was going to trust the professionals. And I was going to just say, no, I'm going to do what they tell me to do. And so as soon as he got well enough to get out of the hospital, he was immediately transferred over to another treatment program, which he went through for 30 days. While he was in there, he set up a program that he was going to go to for a year. So the minute he got out of there, he immediately transferred himself through them to that. He was up there. In the process of that, over the course of about 3 or 4 months, he started calling us again and wanting to talk and told me that he wanted to know if I knew where his brother was because he couldn't find him and we didn't know. And he said, he called me back another day and he said, I'm still trying to find him. And he said, Dad, I got all these guys up here and we decided that every day we're going to get together and we're going to pray for Andrew that we find him.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's amazing. I said, I hope you do because we don't know where he is. And he called me about roughly a month later. And I'll never forget it. I answered the phone and he goes, Dad, I found him. I found him. He's not good. He's not good. But we sent somebody, they're going to get him. And sure enough, they went and got him. They tried to take him up there to the program, but by the time he got there, they said he was so sick he had to be taken to the hospital. And he was 6. My younger son is 6'4". He weighed 133 pounds at that point. Wow. They got him checked in. He finally got healthier. And again, now just to jump ahead, over the course of the next year or two, the both of them had to face their past. They had to deal with all the things that they had done. They had to go through a bunch of things to get that straightened out and all that. But now I can tell you that today, they're both in recovery. They're in roughly, I'd say it's been around 9, going on 10 years or so that they've been in recovery. They're both homeowners. They both have really good jobs. My older son is married. I have 2 grandchildren now that I never thought I would have. And so yes, in our case, the story has a positive outcome, and we saw that. And of course, in the meantime, we had a lot of friends who lost their sons and daughters, and there's no rhyme or reason,
Right.
We know that they did everything too, and this disease is hideous, and it is so devastating. And then now in the age of fentanyl and all of this, I mean, you're just it can just be the one time, and
Yep,
that's
that's
that.
right.
So that was again, that was a very long answer to your
No,
question, but
that
I
was a great
so
answer.
because it to me, it's not it didn't happen like that. It
Right.
was a significant amount of time, and it was really hard for us, but we were at the point where he needed to do it,
Hmm.
and we never abandoned him. We never ever said we wouldn't talk to him. We never ever said we wouldn't try and help him. We never ever said we would, we don't want anything to do with you. Never. But did we set
Hmm.
boundaries to take care of ourselves? Yes, we did. Yes, we did, because we needed to, for ourselves and for him. And we wanted to send him the message, which we tried to over and over, that we had faith and we had confidence in him that he was going to beat this.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we never wanted to give him the impression, well, honestly, we never wanted to give him the impression that he couldn't do it, because
Right.
we we don't want him to feel that. We want him to get some self-esteem and to realize that he has it within himself somewhere in there to do it. and,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
did. And I think that's where, in his case, he had to kind of release this whole thing. He had to realize that he needed some, the help that he needed. And in his case, it was a spiritual breakthrough that really made a difference for him. And I think that's key. They find that and then realize that, okay, there is a way out.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is a really important story, I think, for parents to hear because I talk to parents who've been on this journey for many years and are really discouraged, so they need to hear this story that, there's always hope and you just have to keep doing the right things and keep praying. And you are right. There is no rhyme or reason. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but you just have to keep the hope alive and keep pushing forward. Um, I know I've been through, it was only a year and a half that our son battled addiction before, he died. But I've been through the grief on both sides. And I think in some respects, the grief of having a child in active addiction is more difficult than the grief that comes with losing a child. As strange as that may sound to some people, it's just very, very intense
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know from day to day. You're sitting on pins and needles a lot of times, and you have to learn how to deal with those emotions that come up.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And it just is. You can see how devastating it is, and in people's lives. And the sad part is, if they don't deal with it, if they don't get the help, then I mean the parents, if they don't,
yeah,
it's just as detrimental to their health as it is to their loved one. And I
absolutely.
literally just this in the last 2 weeks, got a phone call from a husband, and his wife had taken her own life. and
Mm,
and this was after they had lost their son, and it had been a few years, but she just, as much as he, and even us, trying to reach out and help, it had taken such a toll. And
mm,
she was fighting this thing and fighting it, and she just didn't feel like she could go on. And
yeah,
it was just so it's just so incredibly sad to go back to the beginning of what you said at the beginning about this being a family thing.
mm,
It affects all of the family, and
yeah,
and it may be in different ways, but it can be just as devastating to everybody in the family. And at the end of it, there's research all over that says, if the family is in a healthier place, and if the family responds in healthy ways, then you're giving your loved one a better chance. There's no
that's right.
guarantee. There's no guarantees.
That's right.
But
Yeah,
if you want to do the best you can, it's
mm,
you work on you, and you
that's
work
right.
on being healthy, and you work on having healthy responses, and and uh, and then you give your loved one a chance, because they're just, they've gotten caught up in something that's really made a change in how their mind works and how the brain works, and it's a not an easy thing to break free from.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Kim, it's been great having you here. I think, I mean, we've given a lot of great content for parents today. You've had some, the stories were great, and just the advice, just the tips that you've given parents. Is there anything else before we go? Is there anything else that you'd like to say to parents out there who are going through this?
Well, PAL was founded on this idea of the unique relationships that parents have with their children. And even though we also get grandparents and many other family members that come to our meetings, the reality is when you're dealing with a family member, it is a unique situation in that sense because you have a special relationship with them. And so finding that peer support and having that available to you is critical. And
Hmm.
one thing to just say is that PAL over the years has expanded its resources. So yes, we have meetings. Yes, that's the main thing we would hope that you would take advantage of. But we also have our website at palgroup.org, and on that there are numerous resources that you can read. You can go to our YouTube channel that we have. We have videos with experts to just introduce you to these topics to help you understand a whole variety of different topics on this issue. And so if you're not ready to go to a meeting, you can go watch these videos on YouTube, our YouTube channel. You can go on the website. You can find more information. And then when you are ready, you can go on there and find a meeting. Or if you really want to, like you did, you can say, hey, I'm ready to step up and I might be interested in starting a meeting. And you can send us an email at info@palgroup.org, and let us know. And then we can talk to you about what it takes to be a facilitator and how to start a meeting and all of that. So again, I just appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing here at PAL, the organization, but you're very, very aware of it because you're involved. And I just hope that those who are listening will also find the hope that I did and my wife did through PAL, and that you're bringing to families on a regular basis.
Well, thank you, Kim. I will put the links too for people so they can find the PAL website and the other resources that are out there. Yeah, great organization. It's been great to be a part of it, and it's been a blessing to me and to our whole family. And really, I've seen it help a lot of other parents out there who are struggling. So, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for what you do with PAL, and I really appreciate it. And I hope we get to chat again sometime soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daryl. Take care.
All right, you too, Kim. Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.